fucking got me. You tried to get me.
You son of a bitch. I was ready, man.
Yeah.
So I did put a timer on for an hour just because I thought
No, that's good.
it's good to do an hour. And something that you had mentioned just before, I forgot to finish the thought when you were like, oh, we should be recording now when we were talking in there.
Yeah.
I was thinking of this idea, like, not everything is for everyone.
That's
in
true.
a sense. And to take a dedicated time, and like an hour or whatever, there's a thing that part of me that, like, it sucks because I want to record everything. I want to get all the conversations, you know what I mean? I want, even when I'm in a conversation, when I'm trying to, reflect something back to someone, I'm like, it's almost like there's a laundry list in my mind when someone tells me a story and I'm like, I want to tell them about this, and like all these things.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, I've learned that I have to be okay with not being able to say all those things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And hoping and trusting the things that I did say were still meaningful and important things that I wanted to express, type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, that's what we were talking earlier about. Maybe we can start here with talking about the gut. You know what I mean? And training the gut. And I think, yeah, that is kind of what I was feeling. It's like I'm having these gut reactions in a conversation. You've just told me a story. I feel like, man, I want to tell you about these, like, maybe it's a pattern that I'm seeing, or maybe it's like not significant to me, but I say something to you and you're like, wow, that makes sense, or something like that. But then to be okay with not being able to say it, maybe the time runs out on the conversation. Maybe we go in another way. Like, we talk about those few points and then now we're like going down this other path, and then I can't go through the whole list. Getting to get used to that feeling of like, it's okay. The gut doesn't need to get fully fed every time.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't need to get everything out.
Yeah. And some things are just for you too.
Yeah.
Like, I love the idea of like, take a long walk and don't tell anybody, or like, like help an old lady across the street and don't tell anybody. Take a vacation, don't tell anybody.
Right.
Make a project, don't tell anybody. Just do things for yourself. Go to bed early, wake up, work out. Get a fit body, don't tell anybody. Let them notice for themselves.
Yeah.
Those who notice are the ones, if you're just...
Well, I think even in a way, let you notice for yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and just do something for yourself, exactly.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, like sometimes your thoughts are just for you, and sometimes they come up naturally, and like if you don't get to say everything that you think, I mean, that's probably good.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep some... And then, like, maybe that idea comes up later, and that'll be awesome too.
Yeah.
And it's due time when the listener's ready to hear it.
I think there's something about just even the language we're using of like, there's following your gut, and then there's like overthinking, right? These are the two kind of camps, right? There's the
like
mind,
override the gut,
mind, and then the gut. And I think for me, like I won't go into just because we just started the podcast, but just in reference of like doing push-ups every day, for example, there's a physical example that I'm experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about I know you have also your own experience of like gut physically
literally
things.
yeah
But I also think there was a guy, Zach, I don't know if you remember Zach, but
Breezeball.
yeah
I'm still friends with him.
Nice. Yeah.
Yo, his family is friends with like my homie Zach's family.
No
like,
way.
My roommate Zach, my homie Zach.
Yeah.
So their fathers are friends, and they go snowmobiling, and Zach Breezeball goes snowmobiling up north with like Zach Butt's dad, and that was such a funny connection, like, man, from life. They've known each other, so it's so funny.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I know him. I've kept in touch with him for sure.
So there was one time I remember we were at it was in the morning, there was like there's some sort of like bread dish, and then he was putting butter on it, and he was like putting a lot of butter on it. He
buttered that up.
Yeah, but also I was like, I remember talking to him about that, and he was like, yeah, I butter up because he's like, I can't have any more than this one slice of bread.
Right. So he's like, I'm gonna make the most of it. Yeah.
Exactly, because he has diabetes. Like, he has to consider what goes into his body, because there's especially carbs and stuff. Yeah. And so in the same sense, when we're talking about the gut, like, he has to consider, I can't eat everything in the fridge.
Yeah.
Right. And now back to the example of like, I can't say everything that I want to say.
Yeah.
And I have to be okay with that. Right. He has to be okay with not being able to eat as much bread as everyone else he's seen just gorging themselves on it, as much as he would like to.
Yeah.
He's not knowledgeable of what that experience would be like.
Yeah.
but he's also experienced the repercussions of that. So
Yeah.
there's something to like having these physical examples of like limitations and restrictions that I think really help us learn to like be okay with it. Like, I don't know, there's this contrasting thing I think I'm honing in on of like feeling one way and then still feeling that way, but then acting another way. I guess it's to say in the most vaguest or generalized way, but
Yeah.
I don't know, what is your experience with like I mean, I guess we don't need, I was like, I don't want to necessarily like be like, let's talk about your guts now.
No, that's
But-
cool. Like I'm okay with talking about it. I hold myself back from like bringing it up too much, especially like, you know, like in dating and stuff. So like you don't really want to say that on the first date.
True.
And like nobody really like reacts or anything like that, but it feels kind of like oversharing. It's kind of like a big deal. But no, I mean, that's why something I really need to take more seriously, because like I'm lucky enough that I'm on some medication that really works, and so I haven't had to really watch myself more than your average Joe when it comes to overeating and like eating spicy food that I like. And like I do that and I'll mouth pizza to my face, I'm just gonna pay for it, but anybody would, right? So I don't know if I'm any worse off than other people at this point.
Yeah.
And I've been on these crazy meds for like over half my life now, so yeah, like since I was 14.
Yeah.
And I'm like halfway to 30 now, so
Yeah.
29 and a half, brother.
I'm like math right now, man. I cannot calculate. You know what I mean? I just heard numbers thrown at me and I felt like I saw them go up in the air and I was like, I can't keep track of the numbers, man. I'm sorry.
I love numbers.
Me too.
Numbers.
Don't get me wrong. I'm just in this state of mind and I was like
Numbers
listening.
just make sense to me. I love them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's another topic we can definitely go down. But I mean, I think there's some really cool things in what you said. I mean, I see some resemblances. Like I've been thinking a lot about just like ADHD or just this idea of disorders, you know what I mean? And like really the threshold of something being a disorder is when it becomes an impedance in your life. Like you can't, like when they talk about major depressive disorder, that's like 2 weeks where you're like literally cannot go to work, cannot do anything. You know what I mean? So it's everyone experiences.
Oh, yeah, like I've had relationships with girls that like, with a girl that like, yeah, some days she just didn't talk.
Yeah.
And you just have to like be patient and wait it out, and like eventually she comes back around and
Yeah.
is even like sometimes apologetic about it, but like you don't have to be, but like yeah, it's like it's hard. It's really hard for that.
What I'm trying to think though is like there's a threshold of disorder that we have in the medical system, but we all experience depression. We all experience a form of ADHD. It's a matter of when it becomes an impedance of like in a consistent level. Right?
Yeah.
So when I'm thinking about like your situation with your gut, you know what I mean? It's like there's this impedance, and now with medication, you can now you're at a point where you're like, I'm not really even considering that. I've kind of worked with this thing, and now you know, you still have learned all these examples and this learning to feel with your gut, you know what I mean, in a physical way, which then also manifests in an emotional, like management kind of way, or emotional logical way, I would say. But yeah, I'm just thinking about how medication, like, it's just interesting how, like right now there's a prevalence of mental health, right? And it's hard to diagnose specifically when you're at that threshold of impedance, because everyone's going to experience depression or ADHD or like, you know, this lack of being able to switch focus. But I don't know, it's interesting just how medication can change that. But then I guess I've lost where I was going with that. I just thought it was interesting from
your gut and like
what you were telling me about just how your life has changed, but then also the relationship with medicine. Like usually we are, the conversation of the modern day is like medicine's bad, that like dependency's bad, but then it's all in relation and in context.
I think medicine dependency is how I got in this situation in the first place. Because as a baby, I just had antibiotics like a lot. Because I had ear infections, like crazy ear infections, and like I would just like, I was in the hospital all the time. I was a baby.
Yeah.
I got tubes in my ears on multiple like times.
Yeah.
So I just have like metal tubes just like stuck in, like healed over in my eardrums. And Yeah, and like there's theories, like it's not proven, but like there's theories of like antibiotic use leading to autoimmune type conditions like Crohn's, like what I have.
Yeah.
So yeah, like dependence on medicine as a kid led to like I ended up being like resistant to antibiotics for a long time, and that's how my mom found like homeopathics, and that's how I got it onto that whole train. And then my mom like went all the way down that because that worked for me.
Yeah.
When like antibiotics stopped working, and then that did, and then I ended up like forgetting about all those problems. I never even remembered them in the first place. I remember I used to like not be able to drink milk as a kid. I used to get rashes and stuff like that. I don't know if that's related either, but
Interesting.
for a long time, yeah, we had almond milk in the house, and like
Yeah.
So yeah, there's always been that on the back of my mind. But yeah, I'm allowed to cheat a lot, which is lucky. But yeah, I would way rather just like control the instinct and like control the desire and like eat better, which is why I'm about to start like this Whole30 thing. I don't know if you've heard of that.
No.
Basically just like a temporary restrictive diet, kind of like a cleanse almost.
Interesting. Yeah.
But it's similar to like a paleo type of thing. Like you just like take away anything that is known to cause inflammation, and you just eat like really pure whole foods, like lots of leafy greens and stuff like that. Or like there's like a whole book, whatever. But I'm about to start that, and like I hope that sort of kickstarts a habit. Like I just would rather eat for myself, cook for myself, like know exactly what I'm eating. Like I know that that's good for you. Yeah, I haven't been good at doing that, but
yeah, a balanced diet, things like that are definitely.
I've definitely taken advantage of the medicine. But yo, the meds I'm on is like $5,000 per dose.
Right.
5,000 every 8 weeks, every 2 months, $5,000. So that's what, like $30,000 a year.
Yeah.
And I only pay $100 a dose, so I pay like $600.
With OHIP, you're saying, right? Like
no, it's special. It's outside OHIP. I had to get like special government coverage.
Really?
Trillium benefits. So they pay like pretty much for it. I pay like $110, I think, for a dose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that's. I mean, I forgot.
How we got here?
Not necessarily, but I'm almost not worried about that, and I'm almost more like let's just go with like. Well, I mean, I am now curious about this 30-day diet thing. Like, 'cause the thing that stands out to me is like right now, my focus in my changing of like bettering myself, I guess, is like slow, gradual, right? And anything that's like going to change in a big way, I feel like it challenges this idea of like exertion versus overexertion. Like any big change is now instantly into overexertion.
I think I hear you, yeah.
Which is not necessarily a bad thing. I think like now I'm kind of curious because like I'm almost challenging this idea of like, what does it mean to then just do 30 days? It's kind of an extreme.
I can explain that for sure.
But I do just want to finish this idea just of like this extreme change. Why would it be a good thing? Like I'm thinking, when would overexertion be a good thing? When you're in a heightened state in a different way. It's like maybe the heightened state kind of serves in a way of a distraction, so that the other things in life that you're trying to deal with, maybe, you know what I mean, stresses of job or life or things like that. It's like now I'm going to kind of, this sounds kind of bad, but I don't think this is necessarily what's happening, but it's like add on to that stress of like, now I'm going to do a dietary stress, and maybe that kind of mind focus and tension, my body and mind, we're going to now ache in a different way, but also trying to learn something different that will kind of overpower the stress of life. So in a way, it's almost like there's an idea of stretching where it's not like that you stretch your muscle to expand it, but then there's also a stretch where you contract your muscle for a long enough time where that then it releases its kind of own pressure. So if like for the back muscles,
squeeze all the water out of the rock.
There's like a back muscle stretch that I learned when you were talking about posture for the chair. It was a stretch that I learned where the guy was saying, yeah, you want to be doing this stretch and you want to feel the muscles almost just like you want to be actually contracting them.
Well, you're stretching your chest there.
And you're stretching the chest.
By squeezing your back.
You want to contract the back muscles, and you're holding that for like 30 seconds. And then what you'll feel when you relax your chest, you'll feel the back muscles almost like they're in these tight knots, and then you've over tightened them, and then they actually now release.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is different. You think you always just need to expand them. That's the only way to stretch the muscle. But there's like this counterintuitive way, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I had a massage therapist tell me that once, where he's like, you're overstretching your back, and that's why your back hurts, because you're sitting in a chair all the time, and you're not strengthening your back enough to like hold your chest, muscles taut. So then your chest muscles or your front muscles or whatever are tight, and your back is overstretched, and so that's why your back hurts. So then I flipped the whole script for me, because he's like, you need to really actually stretch your front. And he was massaging like the front of my neck and like more like the front of my body, because he's like, those are the muscles that need to expand. Those are what we need to stretch and massage. The muscles on your back that hurt need to be stronger. They need to squeeze. They need to be tighter. Interesting.
So yeah, this it really, I think this is like the first time this overexertion thing has been challenged for me, because I've been like, overexertion is bad. It's only depreciating returns, like we said.
Diminishing returns.
Diminishing. Yeah, that's right. Diminishing
returns. Kind of the same word almost. Yeah.
But then like thinking like this counterintuitiveness to your muscles are now overstretched. They're not actually strong enough. They're stretching longer because they're not strong.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing. So now I'm applying that kind of logic to this 30-day thing, where it's like, it's counterintuitive, but you're almost overstretching in your diet to then maybe be able to actually strengthen something else, which is you're trying to almost like allocating your resources. You're like, yes, I have life stresses, but I also have dietary stresses. So now I'm going to stress this, work it out, though I still have these other things going on. And by the end of this, I'll have experienced something I can be proud about.
Yeah.
Which then kind of goes towards the life stretches, which is like, I'm not proud about a lot of things I'm trying to change, I'm trying to develop, but now I can point to this. So it's interesting. I'm thinking about
Well, exactly. That's a great way of saying it. Like, now I can point to this. And that's the whole point of doing 30 days, is because within 30 days, your microbiome's going to adapt to what you're eating. In like, that's long enough to change, to completely recycle the bacteria, because your gut is full of bacteria, and that's what digests your food. You don't actually eat the food. It's the bacteria in your gut that eats the food that you eat. So you're feeding them. When you eat, it's not for you. Like, you're feeding an entire civilization of bacteria that depends on you feeding them. And like, when you think of food that way, it's like, it's not me. I'm responsible for this life that lives in me. Yeah. That my body is their universe, right? And they will never see outside of it. Yeah. And that's what I believe we are. I believe we are just in a cell of a bigger being. And that's a whole nother conversation, but like, it's a fractal universe, I think, where you can zoom out as long as you want, and it's just going to keep pretty much looping in different colors or whatever. Yeah. But that's a whole nother conversation.
But I will just mention fractals quickly, just because now I'm jumping. I'm like, I got to say this. It's funny because we were talking.
Need to address your previous question.
You should continue. No, but you're right.
We'll come back to fractals. Yes. Keep fractals. Write down fractals. That's a whole episode, honestly. Like, we could do a whole 2-hour fucking bomb on fractals, to be honest. Like, I think that is so important. But moving on from that, the 30 days. Yeah. The point of doing it for 30 days is that you can change your gut microbiome, and they eliminate foods that are known to cause inflammation, right? In certain people. So if you're experiencing problems related to inflammation, it's like, let's just take out everything that we know causes inflammation we've seen it in the numbers. Let's remove all of those for 30 days. And then you can start, reintroducing your favorites one at a time, slowly reintroduce things, and notice, okay, how do I feel after I add only this? Yeah. Okay, that's still cool. What if I add that? And so it gives you something to point to when you eat. Finally, you break and you have a pizza, and it's like, now I feel like shit after having the pizza. Probably shouldn't eat too much pizza.
Yeah.
And then you can actually say it was the pizza instead of guessing maybe it was the pizza or whatever. That's just like, but there's like sneaky motherfuckers. Like some people just shouldn't eat bread.
Yeah.
And because wheat is very modified. And like some people just don't, especially whole grain. Like the husk is harder on you than if white bread is easier to process. You just got to find one that doesn't have too much sugar. But if you get like a fresh loaf of Italian white bread, like that's, you know, not bad. Sourdough, awesome. But
it is more. Those are the more subtle ones, because I think for me,
exactly,
I can
there's sometimes
distinguish
subtle ones.
I can distinguish McDonald's, and then now I'm at a point where when I get McDonald's, I know what I'm going in for.
Yeah.
And then when I do feel bad after, I'm not like kicking myself around.
No, you knew
like,
what you signed up for.
Yeah, and then I'm like, now I'm just going to try and plan for it, and then just be able to appreciate feeling bad. You know, in a way.
Yeah. Like I pay for food all the time, but it's like I know exactly what I sign up for when I get an ice cream sandwich.
Yeah, the thing that makes me
but
stop,
it's worth
though,
it. I have to decide if it's worth it.
The thing that makes me stop, though, is just now when I start to know that, okay, when I eat this, it's going to have this kind of reaction, and the best way for me to like just to chill with that is just like, you know, maybe smoke some weed and sit on my couch and I'm going to watch a movie. It's like I'm not going to really want to do anything because I'm feeling like right. The thing that makes me stop, though, is like knowing that now this is going to take this much time, right? Whereas before I wasn't thinking about that whole sequence, right, and kind of arranging it like that and planning for it. So the thing that makes me stop eating McDonald's is not that it makes me feel bad.
Yeah.
When I haven't eaten McDonald's in a while, but I honestly don't think I can say that I'm never going to eat McDonald's again.
For sure.
No way. You know what I mean? Like I think I'm always going to have the option, the door open. You know what I mean? At least in my mind, that like some point I'm going to be like, no, I'm going to get him some McDonald's.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, for sure.
But
yeah, it's okay to do that occasionally, and you know what you're signing up for at the moment. But the point of this diet is that like it's for people who don't know, or people who need to like, you know, why do I feel like shit all the time? Like, but and like in little ways too, where like if you've been treating yourself wrong, eating something that you're mildly allergic to or sensitive to for your whole life, you don't know any different. That just feels normal. And then when you strip those things away for 30 days, you get a chance to like withdraw from all those, and like all those bacteria in your gut that like the food that you have taken out are going to die, and that's going to be painful for you to go through. Yeah. But then with the new food that you're eating, you're going to support different bacteria, and like when you take probiotics and you introduce those bacteria willingly, and like fermented food is really good for that too. Yeah. And like when you start doing that and you introduce really healthy bacteria and you kill the bacteria that feeds on inflammatory foods, that is a reset that like will shock people, and they're like, all of a sudden I can sleep way better. I'm not insomniac anymore, and like stress, and like man, you know what I learned on another podcast, Huberman Lab is a great podcast, and like he did a whole series on gut health. And the most interesting takeaway was that there's actually a lot of neurons in your gut, brain cells. Like your gut is a second brain. It's an extension of your brain. It's tapped. It has a direct pipe, the vagus nerve, between your brain and your gut. And what is different from that than the pipe that connects your left and right hemisphere? Like they are completely separate, except for one wire that goes between them. That's super important, obviously. Yeah. But a very similar wire connects both of those to your gut, and it's like a direct freaking hyperspeed Ethernet cable that just like ties your gut with, and that's brain cells in your gut. Brain cells, man. That's unbelievable. Yeah. So gut health is brain health, and it's purely powered by food. Yes. And like realizing that, and then how can you deliberately like harm that, like without some guilt? Like, and I do all the time. Like I haven't been able to stick to anything. I'm so weak when it comes to like sticking to a diet, but that's what I hope the whole 30 that I start now is going to flip a switch, where if I can last 30 days on the strictest possible. Yeah. And then just slowly reintroduce and be able to pretty much hold that, but like occasional cheats or whatever, or things that Yeah, because you take away all grains, chickpeas, quinoa, rice, like a lot of staples. Like you take a lot of shit away. But then when you put it back, you can do it one variable at a time, and then you can have something to point to, and then you know yourself better.
Yeah, it's
so
cool.
That's why 30 days.
I like the things that you brought up about like the Osmosis Jones. I always think about that movie.
Yeah, I love that movie.
There's a whole civilization,
Murray,
and they personify like all these things that are happening in our body, more like organs and like
they like
cells and things like that.
Personify, that's a good word.
It's really cool. I think.
My mic's just been like dangling here. I didn't even tighten this up. That's cool.
Hey, it's still been working.
It's well balanced. Clearly.
I didn't even notice that it was like just like dangling, not even tightened up either.
Yeah, like this the shock mount was just loose. That's awesome.
But yes, the Osmosis Jones thing you brought up. There's a whole civilization of gut bacteria. I remember learning like in nursing school about.
Sorry, one sec. And so I love how because I didn't bring up Osmosis Jones at all. You just said the Osmosis Jones thing that I brought up. It's funny that you've been thinking that this whole time.
Well, I mean, I was using it
I
as
didn't even think about that.
The thing is, like, I gotta
rewatch that movie.
I used to take notes when I would talk with people, like, especially about deeper conversations, not just like regular talking. But when we were like getting into deeper things, I would take notes. And then my friend who was in psychotherapy school, like, they say, like, try not to take notes. And I was like, I think do the opposite. Like, take as many notes as you need to at first, but do it in the sense of like you're actually writing these notes in your mind.
Yeah, but I think
you're gonna get to a point where you don't need to write notes, but you've done the practice enough so that you can take notes in your mind. So for me, going Osmosis Jones, like there's a whole track I have.
Right.
There's Osmosis Jones, the civilization. There's the relationship of the central nervous system and food.
Yeah.
There's gut bacteria in our gut, but then there's also gut bacteria in our brain.
Yeah.
And then there's that same relationship of nerves, the same neurons in our brain and in our gut too. So there's like a relationship. I mean, the whole electrical system in us is based on calcium and phosphate. You know what I mean? So it's like those come from the food that we eat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there is a huge, definitely relationship with all of that. And the gut, the bacteria or the biomes that are in our brain and in our gut, like they're making a lot of these extra chemicals.
Bacteria that lives in your brain?
Yeah, well, there's things that can pass the blood-brain barrier, right?
Certain things, yeah.
And so in our gut, these things are in our gut. Our gut. I like also how you emphasized that there was this civilization doing like a lot more work. Our guts do in like digest some of its own with like the cilia and how it's all folded very finely. But
sure,
the guts, there's specific bacteria and like organisms that make vitamin K for us. Like if we do not make vitamin K, so we eat food and then these bacteria in our gut make it for us that we can
vitamin C must be the same too, because scurvy and stuff.
I'm not sure, but
if you don't eat vitamin C, you get scurvy.
Well, there's vitamin C that I think we can ingest vitamin C. There's certain vitamins we can't. The body doesn't make I can't remember the specific the correct medical term for it, but like
drop in the comments what the word is for that.
Yeah.
What word is Lucas trying
the
to
vitamins that we can make or generate or that we can ingest, there's certain things that can't necessarily go straight through, and the vitamins like vitamin K, it's produced by a bacteria in our body or in the gut, sorry.
Right, yeah.
So there's
enzymes that pancreas and liver produce and stuff too.
So right? I liked how you emphasized though, like there is a huge importance, like we need this gut bacteria.
We're responsible for their lives.
Yeah.
We are God to them.
I liked it too.
We give them everything.
And you also drew this like cool importance of like, or something that I never really fully thought of like, if I have a forest and it's a whole ecosystem, right? And one of these species starts getting more proliferous, you know what I mean? Like based on the food that are things that I'm putting into the ecosystem, right? It's not that maybe those grains may be bad for you. It's that they're only bad because there's more of this bacteria. So then to reduce, it's like doing like a forest burn. It's like we're going to now reduce the population of this bacteria. It's not necessarily we're getting rid of it, but it's like it's now causing what's it called? Depreciating returns. It's
diminishing returns.
Diminishing returns. Why do I think keep depreciating? I mean,
it's kind of the same word almost, but yeah, depreciating is like a kind of a financial term almost. But
man, I literally took a moment to try and...
Depreciate is the opposite of appreciate.
I took I took a moment in silence there, and I was like, said the two words in my head, and then I was like, that's the one for sure. Nope, it was not. That was what my gut was like. That's
diminishing returns is also kind of a financial term, but it's also like when the effort, like, you know, if you start working late to the point where it's like, I'm just tired, and all you can think about is I'm just tired, but you're still trying to grind. It's like these hours aren't paying you back anymore. It's diminishing returns.
Yeah. What's interesting though is what we're talking about is a planned diminishing return. You know, like where you're planning to do this diet for 30 days to have diminishing returns on specific parts of your population of your gut biome. You know what I mean? So it's like it's overexerting, you're stressing, and you even mentioned like there'll be a pain involved. There'll be like uncomfort.
At first,
which is I think,
and then it's destroy and rebuild.
And that's the principle I was going to bring back to the fractals of like anything that's a process of destroy and rebuild. We gotta, and it's like I guess the question is like that's almost a cliche for me now, destroy and rebuild. But then with cliches, we have to unpack that. It's like yes, that may be the simple answer, but then what does it mean? What do we actually destroy? What do we let get destroyed? Yeah, because there are certain things like when I'm like, let's say when I was in school writing essays, I was having anxiety attacks, and I didn't know it until like I started reading the definition of an anxiety attack, and I was like, oh man, that's what happens when I'm writing an essay. So I would smoke crazy amounts of weed. Yeah. Right. And that would kind of help the anxiety. We use medicine because they work, but then also has diminishing returns.
Yeah, right? I mean, if you smoke 10 bowls, you're not going to get much higher than the first two in like your...
But there's also the way to get over that anxiety was not to then try to get a more balanced diminishing return. It was actually to sit with the anxiety, and it would actually start by a huge amount of diminishing return, more so than it would smoking weed. So it's like I'm calculating, it's like I'm going to lose less if I smoke weed, and I'll kind of get a half-ass essay, right? Rather than if I just deal with this face on. It's almost like this idea of karma, right? It's going to get worse later the more I use the weed because I'm not dealing with the anxiety.
Oh, yeah. So the weed is the diminishing returns of the...
It's a less diminishing return. It's almost like I'm going to be able to save more.
Diminishing returns is when... Yeah, well, I mean, I think long term about that. Like, I think that dealing with the anxiety up front has greater returns long time, but because there's in the pain in the beginning. In the moment, it almost doesn't even count. Like
no, but it does count. That's what I'm trying to say. It counts because it has even less, and that's what we don't want to have less of.
But so now we're getting to like delayed gratification, and like taking the pain up front is always better.
It's not, but that's what I'm saying. It's not always better, and that's why the cliche destroy and rebuild is difficult. Though it's true, we have to understand what needs to be destroyed. Yeah. And that's where understanding okay, it's not I need to destroy anxiety through weed. It's like that will help me for a bit, but the more I delay this, the more that I'm avoiding the thing that should be.
The weed to deal with the anxiety has the diminishing returns because it doesn't actually work. So but sitting with it and dealing with it from the root, pulling the root up, is gonna get rid of it.
So my thinking is like, why am I going?
Even though it hurts more.
Exactly. The why am I going the other way is because it hurts less.
Yeah, but hurting less has diminishing returns. In the long run.
Yes.
Exactly.
And that's another thing.
Pain is a symbol of change, right? The more it hurts, the more you change. So if you're diminishing, if you're trying to subdue and suppress the pain, it's going to prevent the change. Change is what we want. That's what we crave the most.
My hesitation with that though is because like I always go from extremes, right? So when I hear one thing, I always like, okay, what does that mean in the extreme of like change is pain is a good thing because it means change. Yeah. So then what I've heard people say is then life is suffering, right? Which is the Buddhist thing.
Yeah, I'm a Buddhist, man.
Right? But the thing is, what I don't like about that full extreme is then like I don't think life is only suffering though, because I think there is things that aren't, and there's pleasure, but the thing is that comes actually more from the recovery of pain, not the pain itself, because pain is only half of the story, and that's why I feel like it kind of there's in my belief with Christianity is like there is a piece of heaven. There's an example all around us and in us and between us, you know what I mean, of what is proper. Right, and what we're actually experiencing, like there's verses that say like nature is in pain, it's crying. Like when we hear the birds singing, it's like they're asking for things to be back, right? So these are like, come on, can we please just go back? And I'm like, I think that's what I feel in my deepest, darkest moments too, is like my body and my nature is feeling that yearning. Right. And then for me to say at that moment, well, then life is just this pain and I'm just growing and I should just always seek this. That has also had a negative effect on me because I lived 29 years of my life only seeking that pain because I learned so much from it.
Seeking the pain's not the point, but yeah.
But I learned, so I wasn't like I was seeking it in the sense of like I was very open to any time that would come around the corner and I would take it willingly.
Sure.
Because
okay.
being wrong was so much valuable, like so much information, right?
Yeah.
But then what happened was like I didn't value anything of myself. I had zero.
Yeah.
So that's where the
hard part.
When I hear people say life is suffering and pain, I'm like, I know what that life and suffering pain is like, and it's not the full answer. And this is where I think Christianity for me has changed a lot of that because Christ sees me differently, and that's what I can't accept because I know that life is pretty much should be only pain and suffering.
No, it's not that life should be only. It's just that pain and suffering is inevitable in life.
But see, that's where the mercy, like, why isn't it purely pain and suffering? Because it's supposed to be. Yeah. And if we had our way, it would be. And that's what's crazy is like God's mercy is that it isn't.
Right.
And that's what I appreciate is like we can sit here, do this, and appreciate, actually have a good time.
Patio.
You and I are not necessarily in pain. We're whatever pain we're experiencing is more like a workout pain. Right? So there's nothing bad about this. And so life isn't all suffering.
Yeah, there's positive change in pain too, right? Yeah.
So that's where I'm thinking like that.
I mean, there's usually positive change in
So
pain.
what we're talking about there isn't actually pain. What we're talking about is what I would say is love. Because love is to willingly and consciously sacrifice for something, which in some sense, if I was to describe what that feels like, it feels like pain at first and then it ends with awesome, which is exactly how you described.
Yeah, like a workout or a cold shower or something.
Cold shower, even doing the dietary thing.
Yeah.
It feels, I'm doing all this thing. And then you start eating certain foods. You're like, wow, this actually makes me feel bad.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll stay away from it. But then this other food like pizza, well, pizza made me feel bad before. But now after I've done this, actually pizza makes me not feel bad. Also, it wasn't pizza.
Well, then you could
say,
yeah, pizza wasn't the problem. It was something else.
It was the balance.
Yeah.
And I need to maybe understand that other things are actually contributing to my ability to not enjoy pizza. So now I should maybe withhold drinking or eating applesauce with my breakfast because that's actually somehow affecting my ability to eat pizza.
Exactly. Yeah, I did a Viome test. Dave bought it for me, which was awesome. And yeah, he told me that like I should eat lots of olives and I should not eat like bananas. Like it was like such a weird list. But then I had like crazy diarrhea in Mexico and pretty much wiped out that whole test. Like all those results are irrelevant after you do something like that. But no, I mean, this is a way to sort of do that more intuitively within yourself, to go find out be able to actually listen to the signals.
What's interesting is all feeling, you know what I mean? It's like
I wanted to actually not counter but respond to your point about life being pain, and like sort of give the Buddhist perspective on that, because like it's not saying that life is all pain, but it's saying that it's not all joy either, and it can't be. So the whole thing is the middle way, and it's like just always remembering to come back to the middle, even though you're going to always swing around it in a waveform that's constantly fluctuating between pain and joy, pain and pleasure. And it's not all pain, but there always will be pain. Yeah. And it's not all joy, but there always is joy if you look for it, right? And it becomes a perspective, but like the middle way is always there. And I think like everybody has a personal spectrum of what is the ultimate pleasure and what is the ultimate pain. And like somebody who's very privileged and rich in the 1% like their idea of the ultimate pleasure is luxury beyond belief, and their idea of ultimate pain is like a bad hair day maybe.
Yeah.
But that to them is what suffering means, and that's like, you know, as someone who's not in that 1%, like that seems silly, but that's real for them. They don't know anything else. It's not their fault.
Yeah.
They don't know anything else, and that's why the Buddha is such a crazy is like the one who could teach this from the beginning, is because he was born a prince, was given the ultimate luxury from his father, tried to protect him from suffering.
Yeah.
So he went like through all childhood and adolescence knowing nothing but luxury, and then finally left the palace, discovered poverty for the first time, was fascinated by it.
That's right.
What the heck? People live like this? This is real? Like, he was like mind blown, and then decides to like leave everything behind in his late 20s, like left his family at the palace and just like disowned his like family, I guess, and just went to like study suffering and pain. And he went through everything. He traveled around, like stay with a group, eat just like a seed a day, and just like wither away to like in hunger and experience. And he went to experience like all the most, you know, types of suffering, and then ended up like meditating under the Bodhi tree and like fighting off some demon, and like woke up and was like, I understand. And then he has the widest possible spectrum of ultimate pain and ultimate pleasure, and so he's the one who actually knows where the middle is, and then he starts to teach that to people, and that's where it all comes from.
My understanding too is like there's a huge difference also with knowledge and experience, right? You learn, like I'm sure the Buddha went through his travels and like thought about, oh, I should only eat like what these people are eating, but then also came into circumstances where that's all he had to eat, right?
It was a long journey, like many years where he traveled,
which are two different kind of things, right? And I think of that like I'm going into the cold shower choosing it, you know, thinking like this is what I should do, but then like I've also experienced times where I only had cold water to shower with, and those were brutal.
Yes.
So it's interesting, like I think, like I hear what you're saying, there is this weaving, right? And I think there is, like I always bring the analogy of the tightrope walker, right? Like balance in life isn't walking across the tightrope without having any adjustments. Like it's not practical. Right? We never have seen it, so why would we say like that's how we live our life? So it's this balance, and that balance is like happiness and sadness, I now come to think, rather than like left or right. And now also I think like the more we try to numb ourselves to how we have to balance, then the less we feel of either or.
Exactly.
Right? But the less we feel of pain, the less we feel actually of happiness. Those are related. So I see how in Buddhism there's this relationship. There's like there's acknowledgement of these two sides. I guess the difference for me with Christianity is like why does even the other side exist? Because in my experience of knowing this can exist and knowing I can go there, I tend to just go here.
Well, I think what you were saying is kind of like the way that darkness is nothing but a lack of light. And so pain and suffering is just a lack, or like God's mercy is that light. So like by putting mercy, he creates a balance. By giving mercy, he creates a balance, and like otherwise there would be nothing but pain. And that's like what hell is, like I think like representing.
So that for me is like without acknowledging God, then it is only pain. Like we can definitively say we experience it, but then like why is that even their relationship, right?
And
like,
in that sense, God is everything good in the world represents God. And like,
well, I think
is God speaking to you and stuff.
I think it is. I mean, I think he's also more than just everything good. He's an actual being. Right. And there's the God, the Holy Spirit.
He's manifested through like anything good in the world is you recognizing God.
Well, there's God, the Holy Spirit, and Jesus Christ, right? And they all have a role and position, and they're three in one. Like our brain, like it just doesn't make sense to have three separate things and be one. But that's now another topic. But like this, I think for me, the main thing I'm drawing the distinction of is just that recognition that like why is it important to recognize that even good or mercy exists, right? Like, because to a certain point, it doesn't really matter, right? Like in my idea of what we're describing, there's this balance, this good and bad. There's like yin and yang. That to me is like what we understand chemistry or like physics, right? There's a balance of energy is not created or destroyed, it's transferred.
Yeah.
And that's yin and yang. That's us on the tightrope.
Yeah, it's just constantly cycling,
but
like a waveform.
What benefit do we have of then now looking at saying, well, then what if there's something else here? What if mercy is actually introducing good and holding back evil, holding back everything that could be? Right, and then it starts to now establish a new relationship. So that's why this like a tattoo idea in my head is the Tien symbol, and then a triangle with no bottom underneath, and then the yin and yang. So everything under heaven is yin and yang. Mm-hmm. So then there's this. Almost now we can look at the world and its relationship and say, if you get hurt, then you have the right to hurt them.
Right.
Right, and that's like forgiveness without remorse. Like you can. Or forgiveness with remorse, right? That balanced relationship. Like you can forgive someone if they have remorse. You can hurt someone if they've hurt you, right? But then there's something different though with this new relationship. I think with evil holding it back, there's now something outside of yin and yang where it's like I can forgive without you having remorse. I can not hurt you back if you've hurt me. Mm-hmm. And now suddenly this relationship of yin and yang has been disturbed.
It hasn't been disturbed because it will balance out somehow.
But who's balancing it, right? And that's the thing is like there is something greater that there's an but God is the one who's the balancer, right? There's no fight of good and evil. Right? There's no balanced forces that it's like even the demons.
Well, I see it as like almost a gravity sense, like it's like a natural force. It's a force of nature is that it's balanced. It's like a magnet. Like it has to have the opposite polarity of the magnet has to exist.
Yeah, but then you look at life, right? And then we're saying then when parents have a child, then there's something less life.
The equal and opposite reactions have to both exist.
Life comes, and I think it's a miracle. Why? Because it's like something has sprouted from nothing.
Yeah.
The humans that made them aren't suddenly less. Energy is only not created or destroyed, it's only transferred, and yet something is born. You know, and then we can say
something else dies.
Maybe that's how it plays out in the bigger picture, but that's also maybe a way of discounting that there is something new. There's something actually breaking the mold.
Yeah.
There actually is not so much of a big thing in quantum and physics in general is the idea of symmetry, right? Symmetry is big or symmetry is not big. And that's where I'm thinking. It's like, well, why is that a big question? Because it's like we're challenging yin and yang with what we know. Every time we drop the can, it falls because of gravity, right? But then there's maybe another thing that we don't understand yet, which is like...
There definitely is another thing we don't understand. I'm going to refill us. Oh, those waveforms looking good, buddy.
But yeah, I think...
Yeah, cheers.
I think this... Oh, cheers, man. These things, I mean, it's not... I'm not saying these things to convince. I'm just more or less thinking
we're just talking about it.
There's a whole... There's things that I don't want to look at, and I think this thinking has compelled me to look at them, you know. And I think also part of
that's what sorry.
Well, just something that just I would bring it back to the Buddha's story that you said, and
sure.
I enjoy hearing it. I think it's interesting to me because I think it's like we can everyone can relate to it at some point.
Yeah.
Which is why it's helpful, but I also think like there's this idea of like life kind of has to happen to you.
Yeah.
You can't really go and seek it, right? So he could seek suffering, but also there's going to be times when suffering comes.
I think,
and that's what he, I think, ultimately learned in the end was because there's, I think, times where he talked about almost the ridiculousness and vanity of what he did. You know, there's almost like a pointlessness to the extremes.
I mean, he left a child behind and like...
You know? So it's not...
a palace, but...
But you know what I mean? So it's like, I think there's part of it where he's like, yeah, there was a pointlessness to some of the things, and there was other things that things that he went out for and then things that have happened. And I think that's, for me, this relationship I've been thinking a lot about. It's like our knowledge can prevent us from going through an experience.
Yeah.
And maybe this is to bring it back to the gut thing, right? Which is like my knowledge of, you know, talking to a girl, telling her that I really like her. I said really likes her. I'm slurring over my words now. We just got a refill.
No, yeah, okay.
But like going through that, it's like my knowledge of that experience, maybe previous experiences, or just even this idea of being embarrassed or have all that stuff, like of them kind of a bad reaction, can prevent me from going through the experience, right? Which is interesting, rather than like just learning to just go through an experience, which is kind of like following your gut in a sense. Mm-hmm. So learning that, yeah, sometimes you're going to eat some things and it's not going to agree, right? But are you going to regret regardless. Eating some durian and having some
durian? That's the fucking fruit. You know, I was trying to think about that fruit the other day.
But like, you know, I think about that kind of example. Durian is nasty, but the experience of doing that with my friends who like durian, and just them to see me squirm, and me not enjoy it, I can almost look back and say that was a fun time. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's like following your gut. It's like I know I don't like durian, but I have a story about it. Yeah. And I did it, at least. And my knowledge didn't inhibit the experience. Yeah. So I think, I don't know, there's something to that about, we started talking about the mind and the gut. And we talked about a little bit before about that relationship. And I guess for me, in my extreme, when I go from one thinking, I go to the other, it's like, we got to follow our gut. I'm like, hold up, no. But we also can't forget about the mind, but we also can't just only think in the mind. We have to bring experience to it. And experience, we can't always get in life. We can plan to get experience, but there's also an aspect of experience that happens to us, and we just have to be open. And that, to me, I think, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you're right. Yeah, like we have to be just aware that fluctuations are gonna happen and nothing is here to stay, and we continue forward through time as we experience it, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, but like knowing that you're always gonna swing back the other way regardless. Take comfort in that.
I take comfort in it, but I don't take comfort in it when I'm in the depth of the swing. Because even though I know it's temporary and eventually,
that's what, you know, enlightenment is. And like, it's like you can rehearse as much as you want, but like when you're on stage, it feels different every time, and you can't rehearse for that. Knowing that the moment now, like when you rehearse, you can always, let's run it again. That was a bad take. But when you're on stage, it doesn't matter what happens. If my kick pedal falls apart, luckily it's during the breakdown and I can scramble around, reattach it, screw it in, make it right back for the drop. But like that's on stage, and that only happens once. Yeah. And like the same thing, like every time it gets good, it feels, you know, different. And every time it feels bad in a different way. But like knowing, like you can't, all you can do is best prepare yourself for each fight. And like you got to go back to the gym, you got to train, and then when the fight happens, it's going to feel different every time.
You know what, the way I relate to that is doing live sound for shows. Every live
way
sound
scarier
show
than the studio, man.
Every live sound show I've ever done, I always get a blip of feedback at some point.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
Right?
Yeah,
and so I used to think...
You always get a side-eye from the singer at some point.
Man, whenever that happened in the moment, the amount of embarrassment, frustration, anger, I'm like, like it like now it's noticeable, the sound, right? And that's not the job of the mixer, right? Yeah. But after it happened a lot of times with doing the Middle of Nowhere, like on a weekly basis of having a feedback spike every single show.
You know that it's like it's gonna happen at some point. You just quicker you dip it, the better.
But I kept asking myself, like, why is every show going to get feedback? Like, why can't I stop myself from just doing the bare minimum? Like every show, I'm trying to push it. And then that's when I realized, I'm like, that's why I feedback every show, is because I'm trying to push the limit. Get the
loudest, yeah.
Like, and that's what, now I'm like proud of it. I'm like, tell people, like, I'm like, my thing is vocals. Like, as a band, you guys are playing, whoever the singer is, like, I'm making you the loudest. And they always appreciate it. But then I'm like, but that also comes at the cost of like
guitars, and
there's going to be maybe a feedback hit.
Right.
Maybe not for your band, maybe the next band, but that's where I'm trying to push it.
Yeah.
So over time, I started to realize, like, in the moment, and even still to this day when it happens, the feeling of frustration and anger is the exact same. And now I'm at a point where I'm like, the moment that stops happening is bad.
Right.
Actually, things that are embarrassing are supposed to be. Things that are frustrating are supposed to be, and I'm supposed to now learn to be like okay with that. And in fact, I know now in the bigger picture what it means is like I'm trying to push it. It doesn't mean I'm a noob, though. Oftentimes having that happen would be like a noob.
You have to be a noob to grow. You have to be a noob to be a pro. Like, you have to.
Yeah, there's a Jordan Peterson quote my friend sent me, and he said, but he said you have to be willing to be the fool.
Yeah, I know
to
what
succeed.
you're talking about. I know the quote.
You know what I mean?
For
and
sure.
I think right now the person we need to quote most is Will Smith.
And Verdonk told me that in drum lessons too. He's like, the thing about drums is you have to suck loudly, and you have to be willing to suck loudly before you get good. You have to play like, drums are loud.
Yeah.
And if you're a beginner, it's going to sound bad, but you have to be willing to sound bad real loud.
You know what's interesting with that?
And that's awesome.
It's like that you have to sound loud is the goal.
Yeah.
So you're going to sound bad, that's fine. But if you're not loud, then it's an issue. Then you're not drumming. Yeah. So it's interesting.
And then control comes later, but that's a whole nother topic.
Like I relate that with the push-ups. Like I said, I want to do 100 push-ups a day, so I started with 10.
Yeah.
Because I was like, it's every day is the thing, not
exactly.
the number.
That's the point. The 100 push-ups isn't the point. The every day is the point.
Yeah.
And not so much that you can't rest it off, because if you overexert, like we've been talking about, then you have like 3 days of recovery and you think you hate push-ups because you tried to do 100 on your first try. You can't do that.
Yeah.
You got to do 10 until 10 feels too easy, and then you do 15 until that feels too easy, and then you gradually, and then when you do 100 it feels easy.
Yeah.
And you only have to rest, half the day, and then you can do it again tomorrow.
So I was just having a meta moment of like, that's what's happening right now with this podcast.
That's exactly. This is a trial episode. I've been thinking throughout this whole thing that we should just post this anyway. Like, this is just a trial, but we're definitely posting this, and we can re-record intros and stuff later. But like, this has been dope. Yeah. This is definitely the first episode. Like, we're doing it. This is the show. We're doing it right now.
Oh man,
it's the show.
Yeah, welcome to the show.
Shut up, Pie of the Band.
We should have like a Wayne's World thing where we like, you know what I mean? Like they do excellent part-time Wayne's World.
Yeah, we'll have a full-blown intro.
Yeah,
and we're gonna do YouTube episodes in the future too. Like this one might just have to have a logo on the screen or something boring, like a little whatever.
No, we'll put
visualizer.
the waveform thing on it.
Yeah, we'll put a visualizer. That's fine. But like later, we should definitely film it for YouTube and like, do a proper 2-camera.
Man, I don't know. I feel like that's that 10 push-up thing though. Like I feel
no. I mean, it'll come later. It'll come later. But we're totally capable.
I was just about to say,
we're gonna have guests on.
Yeah.
I already got a few people in mind.
Yeah,
to be a
I would
guest.
love to keep doing it here. By the way, like I think doing it on the patio.
I was starting to think of names like Talks on the Porch or something like that. I don't know. We'll come up with a name later.
The name for the podcast I had for my, I don't know if it's just my individual channel. I mean, I'm not necessarily, I guess I do have some pride and ownership over it that I would like to keep in some way, but it's called Better Out Than In. Because I would always say that on Discord. And Carter started telling me, he's like, you always say that. And then I actually started always saying it. Right? And I think it might have been him that told me, because I was telling him about maybe doing a podcast. He's like, you should call it Better Out Than In. And I was like, that's such
you told him about this?
No. Like, this is like
another
a
one.
long time ago.
Right. Carter?
Yeah. Vashables.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, shout out Vashables.
Yeah. And he was, and I think it was him that told me you should call it that. But, or regardless, he was a big part of getting that name, because I just started saying it as a joke, and then that's the timer for the hour.
Fuck the hour. We'll finish these beers. Well, we know when we're done. We can always cut it down later.
But yeah, no. Well, I think it's still good to cut it now. I think it's still, because we kind of just wrapped up. You know what I mean? I mean, we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, we're on an outro vibe at this point.
But Better Out Than In is what I was thinking. But it could be anything.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it a lot, and if you're willing to use it, let's do it.
Well, I think why
there you go, folks. We got the name.
Why I like it too is that it's like the heart of it is that I had this idea about like how we talk about this stuff with like kids. Like for me, I think I'm a person with not to try and sound boastful, I just think this is
Boast
what
away,
it is
brother.
that I think I have a high emotional intelligence. I can pick that up.
Oh yeah.
But I
that's
don't,
easy to see.
it was never explained to me as a kid. Like there was someone who was like describing like, you know, if you were a kid, if you saw someone like your mom or dad crying, would you start to feel like crying or like feel really sad as well? And I think that's what I experienced, but no one ever like explained that to me. So I was thinking about like a kid's experience. Like you have introverts, extroverts, they have their emotions they have their heart in their sleeve. You can see it. If they're reacting, you can see it. So when we see it, we go, oh yeah, this situation affected them. But then that's it. Just
That's
so we can
really
see.
Interesting way of putting it.
But then we have introverts, right? So we have kids that go through a traumatic situation, and I've also experienced introversion emotion where like even when I was streaming, I was so upset, I closed my eyes, and in the moment it felt like 5-10 minutes. When I watched the stream, it was 30 seconds. And in that 10 minutes, I was like, I'm raging, I'm quitting, I'm not going to stream again, I'm shutting it all down. And I was like, when I watched myself go through that, I was no emotion, just completely still with my eyes closed.
Yeah.
I was like, that's what it looks like to an introvert.
Wow.
When you see someone, they're experiencing
and
all
it was
this.
30 seconds, but you literally thought you closed your eyes for 10 minutes.
It was probably like 5 seconds.
And it was 5 seconds of...
I had a whole...
It was like 2 breaths.
I had a whole like dialogue.
That's wild.
And I was furious in anger. But then I was thinking though, like when I saw it, I was like, that's introversion, right?
Yeah.
So we all experience extroversion and
introversion.
introversion.
This way.
But a kid that's more introverted than extroverted, we don't talk about their emotions because we don't see any reaction.
Yeah, we don't see.
So it's like, oh, they weren't affected by that situation. It's fine.
Right.
So I was like, in both cases, we just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm thinking this name of better out than in. It's like, we're just going to talk about it.
Just let it out, man. Yeah, it's better out than in. The more I love it so much. I love it so much. It's perfect.
Yeah. It started with just burps and farts. That's what's the funniest part about it.
But now we're getting into the deep weeds and we're in the tall grass and like it means so much more. Like just let it out, man. Like stop holding this shit in. Like we just need to bring people on to talk about trauma, mental health, like talk about just your life. Like I just want to hear people's stories and tell our stories along the way and it's just better out than in. Just let it out, man. Just let it. I fucking love it so much, dude. It's perfect.
I don't know. What I like about this here too is like this feels like a studio set. Like we don't see the screens,
and you can hear the subway train in the background for sure.
Literally, we could hire someone to be mixing at one point. We have guests. Someone's taking. We know it's being recorded.
No, this is my life's
the sound
purpose.
of the city.
This mission that the podcast has, the better out than in mission. I know that's my life's purpose. This is what I've discovered in the last like week or actually it's been like a month. Like my friend Alex and Luke, shout out Alex and Luke, told me on the phone like you should be a life coach. And I laughed it off, but like I think life coach is a corny ass term for it, but like just this idea of just like being a conversationalist that is able to bring the deep trauma out of people, I think is something that both of us are able to do, and like we're clearly able to do that with each other. And I think that the guests we bring on will be able to get some real truth out of them, and that's so important for the world. I think that's a really good thing to do. Like I think that's really what like my life's calling is just to bring the truth out. And to actually express my truth, because I've always considered myself an introvert, and this is why I was so mind blown by the way you just define those terms, because being an introvert I always thought was because I don't really like talk about myself. I don't like to be the center of attention. I'm not very I always thought of extroverts like just love attention, and they love eyes and like they love external stimulation, whereas I'm an introvert because that makes me uncomfortable. Like eyes on me is uncomfortable, and like I like to just like and I consider that being an introvert, but the way you just defined it is opposite, where like I know, because at the gun range I was flinching hard, and like I was like, and my emotions show externally big time. So I just completely redefined myself while you were talking. It's like I've been an extrovert this whole time. And excuse me, I remember you told me that one time. You said I'm more of an extrovert
Oh, really? Did I say that?
Back at Grayson days.
Oh, I don't remember.
When we worked next to each other. Yeah, like.
Interesting. Yeah.
I was like I told you that I'm an introvert, and you're like, I don't think so. I think like you're pretty extroverted. And I was like, I thought about that for a long time, and I didn't understand why. Because like I'm very like, I feel like I always have a mask on. Like in every group, I get along with everybody. Yeah. But I feel like I'm different with every group that I get along with. It's like a different slice of my pie. Yeah. In a way. And like I've always felt like I'm wearing a bit of a mask, and I listen first because I'm listening for what are they gonna accept when I say it. Yeah. So like I'm a very quiet person around new people because I'm listening and I'm observing them to understand like what kind of jokes are they gonna like. And I'm thinking, what side of me are they going to appreciate most? And then I present that to them when I'm finally comfortable. Yeah. But the people closest to me, my brothers, like shout out Ryan and Zach. I love saying shout out. It feels so good.
No, it's cool.
But those are my brothers, and like they see my whole pie. Yeah. They've seen like, you know, and you too. And like, you know, I'm going to shout them out. But like people that are close enough to me have seen more sides, but not all of them either. Yeah. Like maybe, yeah, like those two might be the only ones who have seen like actually every side of me. But like even my own family, like I have a certain like personality when I'm around my family and my parents and my sisters, because they've got kids and stuff. And like I always, when I'm around them, and I fully embrace that side of me at that point. But then as soon as I get home, like the environment changes and my personality flips, and I become like by myself home me, which is like not someone I'm always proud of. And I'm getting onto a tangent, but what was I saying? Oh, extrovert. Like being an extrovert is totally me. Like I like your definition better. It's like you express yourself externally, or like your feelings show like through an external response versus like having an internal response. Which also happens to me, but like, I'm definitely, you can always tell when I'm, that's the thing, I'm a bad liar for that reason. You
can't, my experience is I didn't know that I had an introverted experience of emotion until I saw that on stream.
That's super fascinating.
I watched my own VOD.
That's amazing. I love
That's
it.
What stood out to me. I specifically went back to that moment because I knew how furious and angry I was. And I was literally thinking about quitting streaming.
And then when you watched it from the outside, you're like, that was not even a big deal.
Yeah. I was like, this is like, going to be a good size
It's actually
clip.
Almost impressive because, like, as a viewer, I didn't watch that stream, sorry. But, like, as a viewer.
Don't be sorry. Don't ever be sorry. Yeah, That's not the point of me streaming.
I said sorry almost as a joke, but, like, sorry.
Yeah, no.
Sorry for saying
I do the same thing.
Sorry, not sorry.
No, sorry for being sorry, and then sorry again, and then it's
I'm really not sorry.
No, it's fractals. It's always sorry. Okay. It doesn't negate. Sorry doesn't negate. It just continues, which is great.
It's true, yeah. But yeah, like you can see, like the outside perspective is almost impressive. Where it's like he didn't tilt, he handled it and continued, and whereas in your mind you thought you tilted completely and had a whole monologue in your head. Yeah. And then when you thought it was worth quitting streaming over until you watched it from the outside and you're like, if I saw a streamer do that, like that's actually impressive. Like you see streamers fucking rage, right? Right. And like you just like handled it and then came back and finished your job.
Well, what was crazy is like after because I continued watching and then I started to explain on stream what just happened.
Oh, that's even crazier.
And then as I watched it as a viewer, I'm like, I didn't see that.
You got to post the clip on YouTube or something.
I was like, I didn't see that. I was like, I just saw, I was like, I didn't even know. I was like, are you actually angry? I was like questioning myself watching it.
Interesting. Because like your memory of it was potent anger.
Yes.
That's.
So my perception of myself is very different than the actual perception, right? Which is also a big thing of how we hear ourselves, right?
No, I can relate so much because I rage in my head. I am like so mean to myself.
So what was interesting though in that moment is like what I also witnessed was also that pain, like working out doesn't make pain of the workout easier. It actually makes a recovery faster. So same with emotion, same with following this gut.
And it increases your ability to handle more in the long term. Yeah.
What happened was in the moment, I was like, I'm going to quit streaming all this. I was so angry. I closed my eyes. I let myself just have an introverted experience of it. Because probably part of me was conscious that I'm streaming. Like when you said
For
these
sure.
different groups and changing, I don't think that's a bad thing. It's only bad when we don't know that we're doing it. Do we
guess
know
so.
how we're changing? Because I might go into my nursing class and talk to some people. I'm thinking, we all took all these like science courses and whatnot. Maybe they'll get these jokes, but like that's not always the case. I'm listening like, oh, what's your vocabulary?
What is their sense of humor? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they won't find like this weird medical silly, because my jokes are usually silly, not necessarily like they're just more silly of that nature. I'll just say it before I get self-deprecating. They're dad jokes, but I'm like, part of me is kind of like, there's a funny thing even of that because I don't have kids, which makes me even more afraid of how these jokes are going to be when I do, if I do. But anyways, but there's the changing of that is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just when we don't know it. Like when we're on autopilot and we don't know it. It's like
exactly, it's auto, yeah. So you're not. It's like when you black out, that's autopilot.
So changing,
you get fed ice cream in your.
Changing is like actually a part of normal socialization, I would say, right? Like knowing that when you're at a black tie event, that you have certain etiquette at the table, right, and that's good,
that's
right?
Self-awareness and just situational awareness, and
right, and so
seem like basic skills, but
you have to then have your ebb and flow of like if you're in such a controlled environment that you're gonna have your ebb and flow. And to be able to be your whole pie when you are yourself and be okay with that, even when it's not okay. Because you just went through something that was super stressful and then you're going to double down on it.
Yeah.
By going, well, now I'm super relaxed and I'm getting away with all these things. It's like, listen, you're getting away with them. No, you're not getting away with them because I'm keeping track. But also, cut yourself some slack. You know what I mean? You just went to a black tie event and like, fuck all those people. You didn't want to be there.
Exactly. No, exactly.
But you still kept your etiquette and you still talked. You still did your thing.
If there's nobody who doesn't like you, then you're a fucking pussy.
Yeah.
Because you're not speaking your mind. Because you're hiding a part of yourself, and that's why I've always felt like a bit of a pussy.
But that's the thing.
Because I've always been like just like the
that's
likable
where
guy.
I would say though,
I'm sick of it. I'm tired of it.
If I told you, Lee, that I'm afraid to speak my mind, would you call me a pussy?
No.
That's where the issue is.
Yeah.
Because now
I'm so mean to myself.
There's another level of like, why do you treat yourself differently than how you treat others? That was a huge change for me, my friend. Shout out to Mitch McEachern, my brother.
Yeah, I love saying shout out.
Yeah, he was one of the first guys that told me that. He's like, you would never say that to me, Lucas, so why would you say that to yourself?
Right.
And it was not that I suddenly stopped saying things like that to myself.
That, man. You gotta always constantly be reminded to treat yourself like you're a friend of yourself.
That's where I feel like this exertion thing comes into play, where it's like I need to exert myself on an everyday, where I need to remind myself of that stuff. But I also need to allow myself to fail and forget. But that I'm trying to do this somehow an everyday reminder. And that's why doing the physical thing starts my day with that reminder of like, who's in control is the mind. My body feels this way. My body's tired. It's aching. But my mind knows that I did this yesterday and I should be able to do it today. So now my mind is saying one thing. My body is saying another. And now another part of me is like, let's go. Right? And that's, I think, the real me behind all of that. So there's like my mind, which is also intertwined with my nature. Right? There's this, what I'm obsessed about is that border of the spirit and the body, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's actually mind, body, and spirit, like the cliche is. So there's two other borders that I got to consider, or three borders. Yeah.
It's a triangle, man. Like triangle's the strongest shape, and there's always 2 out of 3 until there's 3 out of 3, and then you get fucking God level.
Well, that's the thing.
God is 3 out of 3, and
that's why I think the yin and yang is incomplete. Because there is the 3, and I think
the 3 is the entire circle,
and that's the fractal.
The 3 does exist.
That's the fractal that we see, right? And really, what's crazy about a circle is like, there was a friend of mine. She was at my church. She was writing her PhD on how circles don't exist. They're a series of lines. Her PhD was on that. So there's like actual like.
Like the world is pixelated.
There's nothing actually circular smooth. So maybe like, I don't know, maybe that's, now I'm bringing my like
Yeah, it's just as
weird
how
idea of,
smooth, like how subtle are the differences.
maybe the pixels aren't square. Maybe the pixels aren't circle. Maybe they're triangle. And through triangle, we get squares and circles.
Shit.
Right? But one way we see the planets aligned. One way we see the planets in a disarray. Both things we're looking at are true. So these two truths don't counter each other as square view of the world.
It's just a matter of perspective.
Or circular view of the world. This is where I think of like thinking is square, circular is feeling, right? We more spiritual people are associated, or like this idea of like circular, thought, spiritually people. And then you have more logical people who are square. They're squares.
Sharp corners and
right?
straight
But then
lines.
You know what I mean? It's like a matter of...
It's really, yeah, but life exists in the both. Like, it's in between, and that might be a triangle. Or, like, even a triangle, but, like, that's still unnatural because it's really just, like, a completely unique shape every single time, and it's ever-changing. It's way more complicated than even that.
So that's where I think, though, this relationship...
But it's simple. It's simple by saying everything's unique.
We have to follow our gut, which is circular. Even my belly is circular.
Yeah.
And then my mind is a square. It even fits a square here.
Yeah.
Right? And then maybe the triangle is my heart. Maybe the triangle is my whole body. Maybe triangle is everything. And I just looked at the moon. And that's awesome how the moon's out.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Nice.
But yeah. But I will say I do have to take an extraordinary piss. And
Me too.
I feel like we did almost finish, and then we started getting into it again.
We can't help it.
But
I almost thought we exhausted our topics for the day.
No, but this is where it's like, this is where you and I were just, this is what we'll do all the time. Even when we're recording.
Every time we talk,
and when we're not.
Happens,
but we have the hour that we did record and the timer went off, so we can be rest assured.
Did you hit stop? We're recording still.
We're still
okay,
I'm just saying we can be rest assured that
we have enough.
What we've got is what we've got, and then whatever we talking about more,
we should just post it raw. That's what the podcast is all about. Like, people can skip forward if they want, whatever. But like,
what I would like to do is wait a couple days and listen to it again.
Send this to me, yeah.
Yeah, because I want to do.
Oh, this is just the trial run too.
Because what I want to, what's really hard about listening to it again is listening to yourself.
I bet.
But the practice that I've been trying to do is really like. I think shout out to Mitch McEachern, same guy. When he told me about dream analysis, he said one of the more important things about dream analysis is not so much what happened and where you are,
how you felt.
It's the feeling.
Yeah, that's
and so
the most important. Yeah.
When you bring those two things together, so now when I'm listening back to myself, I'm trying to do that more of like, I'm hearing myself and I'm like, oh, I'm talking about this stuff, and that's like the physical elements of my dream.
It's
like,
the monkey
what
mind.
was I feeling when I said those things to you?
That's what matters.
What was I feeling
That's what your memory is. Like, that's not just dreams. That's just, like, that's memory in general. It's way more emotionally based than it is logically based.
Yeah.
And that's why dreams lack logic completely. They're entirely emotional. And that's why they're so important. But, like, when you recognize that life is just a dream and, like, the emotional content is all that you ever remember, and you reconstruct all the logical details every time you remember something, the logic is different. The when and the why and the how is always different every time you remember, but the emotion is what matters.
Yeah.
And that's why dreams really matter, because if you analyze your dreams, you can see, well, how do I actually feel without any logic? And you reconstruct a memory, because you remember your dreams. Like, that's a weird ass memory.
Yeah, you're using logic, though, to get the dream memory back. And that's,
exactly. You're redoing the logic every time.
That's the logic is the coding, is the binary.
So the dream could have been totally different from what you actually remember the dream being. And in fact, the dream changes every time you remember it. And that's every memory. It's not just dreams. Dreams are just the perfect example because you know that it's personal. But I'm just going to go ahead and say, sorry if my mom or my dad are listening, but like, acid taught me that, where like I'm sitting next to somebody knowing that what I'm looking at is not what you're looking at.
Yeah.
And every experience is completely my own. Dreams are just the most obvious example of that, but every single experience is completely my own. And the guy next to me is like, me and you looking at each other are not having the same experience right now.
Yeah.
We're having our own version of this experience.
Yeah.
But it's totally unique. Like way more different than we might think.
Yeah, I would say though, I think it's more unique in ways that we are not able to recognize, and they're more similar in ways that we're not able to recognize either. Because I think,
but it's up to ourselves to translate that and to move forward. And every time we have a memory of this, it's going to be different. And yeah, fuck, man, we could just go off.
Yeah, but I do think there is a shared experience. There is a shared experience, and why?
Yeah, sure, there's a shared experience, and that's what reality is made of.
Yeah,
whatever we can agree on is reality.
The way I like to my friend, I won't say I get into any names, but my friend had a conversation with a mutual friend of ours, and he's very successful, this guy, and he's looking over his resume, and he's like, this little point you have on your resume, the small little point, is the biggest point on your resume, and you made it one line. This is major.
Yeah.
And that really started making me think, that example of like there's something major about us that we see, and we think in ourselves as minor, because we think that is the thing that is the shared experience. But the thing is, the thing is that little detail is not the actual shared experience.
No, it's the uniqueness.
That little detail.
The delta, it's the difference.
Right? But to my friend
this is what makes you different from all the other resumes. And you made a little line about it because you've always been that guy, and you think it's normal and like not worth mentioning, but like because you've always been that guy, no one else has, and that's why you matter. Fuck, man, I like it.
This is why I think our strength is our weakness, because it's our strength because we think it's weak. Mm-hmm. And the thing that we're trying to strengthen, the thing I'm trying to get disciplined. That's probably my strength, but it's weak because I'm just so hypercritical of everything in my life and not having discipline that I end up self-sabotaging myself. So I end up
That's redundant, sorry.
So then it's like a weakness, ultimate weakness, but it's part of my strength. Why am I critical of it? Because it's my strength. So the thing is, why is it devalued in myself? Because it's my strength. Because I think everyone should be held to this strength too. Yeah, it should be.
Right.
And what happens when I
hold... That's your version.
When I hold you to my strength,
yeah,
is I devalue my strength, and then it becomes a small point, and then I don't know myself.
Yeah.
So that's that when we talk about individual experience, that's where I think that's where it's individualized, is more where we think the things that are shared are probably not. And the things that are shared, we can't believe, in a sense. So you and I are actually, you and I are seeing more of the same thing in this experience than we are willing to accept. And we're not seeing things that we think are shared. Where it's like, I'm seeing something in you, Lee, where it's like when you're like, you're an extrovert, Lee, when I said that to you, and I'm like, no, you're both.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
We're all both a little bit. It's just which side you lean more toward.
Yeah. But I will say I have to take an extraordinary piss.
Yeah, we're going to wrap it up right here, folks. Like and subscribe, all that jazz. Smash
I feel like that's a bad way to end it. I'm just going to talk about bathroom talk on the thing.
No, we've already cut. Don't worry about it.
But yeah, thanks everybody for listening. We'll cut this part in. But yeah, thanks everybody for listening. I know you already did the thing, so it's all good. Lee, Roy Jenkins, and Don Fay.
Lucas, Don Fay, Thunder Sluzar.
The many names.
Yeah.
Many names. The Griffin.